The threat of homegrown terrorists attacking inside the U.S. has dominated the conversation in the presidential race, especially after San Bernardino.
Radical Islamic terrorism has declared war on America. The Islamists are a grave threat, and we have a president who will not even utter the words, much less stand up and defend this country.
We have a serious problem with, as you know, with radical Islam. We have a tremendous problem. It's not only a problem here, it's a problem all over the world. I want to find out why those two young people, those two horrible young people in California, when they shot the 14 people, killed them, people they knew, people that held a wedding reception for them. I want to find out, many people saw pipe bombs and all sorts of things all over their apartment. Why weren't they vigilant? Why didn't they call?
And this is one of the risks of homegrown violent extremism. These are not people that have ever done anything before, who suddenly become radicalized and within months are taking action.
We cannot give in to fear. We need a comprehensive strategy to counter each step in the process that can lead to an attack like the one in San Bernardino.
CNN's national security analyst Peter Bergen researched the threat and the response to homegrown terror. His new book is called United States of Jihad. Welcome, Peter.
Good morning.
Are you hearing anything that suggests a solution to the battle against terrorism in the political campaign?
Well, we've heard a lot of rhetoric. I think one of the reasons Donald Trump and Ted Cruz are doing well is they seem to provide answers. Ted Cruz is saying we should carpet bomb ISIS. Well, that actually is not such a good idea because ISIS is embedded in the civilian population in Syria, and Donald Trump has said we should ban all Muslim immigration. Yet most of the people who are carrying out these attacks are Americans, American residents, American citizens. So that doesn't really solve the problem either.
So that's a really important point because you go in this book and you go and talk to many of the friends and family of those who have been arrested.
Yeah.
Underline that. How many have been arrested since 9/11?
There have been more than 300 cases of people involved in some kind of jihadi terrorism crime, and they're overwhelmingly American citizens and residents.
You said 4 out of 5 were Americans.
Yes.
That's what was interesting to me.
So banning them would not have solved this problem.
No. I mean, Major Nidal Hassan, who killed 13 people at Fort Hood, Texas, was as American as anybody, in the United States. He was born in Virginia. So banning the immigration would not have worked.
So what did you find were the roots of their radicalism?
Well, everybody's complicated and each person is a little bit different. Some people have personal disappointments. Some people, object to American foreign policy. Some people are Islamic, very, radicalized. Each person is a little bit different. Often there's a sort of cocktail.
But how do they go from radical to action?
Yeah.
Well, the FBI spends a lot of time thinking about this issue because it's not a crime in this country to be a radical, to have radical ideas. But, the FBI is looking for things like, are you starting to assemble weaponry? I mean, what are the indicators that might indicate that you're on the pathway to violence? Yeah,
but before you assemble the weapons, you have to have some moment in which you've crossed some line saying, I'm going to do something.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a puzzle. I try to answer that question in my book. But for each individual, that's a very individual decision.
No common denominator.
Yeah, no common denominator.
But you also found, though, here are people who are born and raised in this country who are cheering for American teams. They're playing video games. But you found that there's a certain profile. Their average age is 29. They're educated. They're not loser-type people, as
they're
you
not
say.
the kind of young hotheads of popular imagination. A third of them are married, a third have kids. They're as educated as the average American, similar incomes. These are ordinary Americans.
You said the American dream has been good to them.
Yes, well, and American Muslims in general. I mean, the American Muslims are well integrated into American society in a way that's not true in places like Paris or London.
Is this a growing threat for the United States?
No, I think it's actually a threat that we've managed pretty well. Nearly a decade and a half after 9/11, on 9/11 there were 16 people on the no-fly list. Now there are 47,000. I mean, we've created, our defenses are very good. That's what, if we'd had this conversation in 2002 and we said that since there would only 45 Americans would be killed in this country by jihadi terrorists, that would have seemed impossibly optimistic. And yet, so we've done a pretty good job.
We've heard from the FBI Director, James Comey. They now have active investigations in all 50 states, ISIS sympathizers. How, though, did we miss the San Bernardino couple stockpiling ammunition, aggrieved, and how they were able to carry this out?
Well, they were married, so they didn't have to have meetings. They didn't have to call anybody to plot. I mean, there was no, and they also were careful about their social media, and they didn't.
But they knew something about her.
Well, they knew, they probably should have known more.
Yeah.
I mean, but, you know, the point is that these were a middle class, they had kids, you know, they had, the husband had a good job. They appear to be, you know, regular, upstanding members of society. And stopping that is not easy.
You know, most Americans put terrorism at the top of their list, but when you go through your book, I thought your book, Peter, was comforting but scary at the same time. So when you put terrorism at the top of your list, when you really look at it, how real a threat is it for us in this country?
Well, it's a very I mean, you're 5,000 times more likely to be killed by a fellow American with a gun than you are to be killed by a jihadi terrorist in that country, and that sort of speaks for itself. Yes, we're more frightened about terrorism than we should be. 24% of Republicans think it's the most important issue in this election. 9% of Democrats. You know, 80% of Americans think that a terrorist attack is likely.
But don't most security officials in the United States believe that the biggest threat they worry about is somehow terrorists getting hold to some kind of nuclear or
yeah, I mean,
weapon of mass destruction?
Some kind of, you know, I mean, it is. I mean, you think about the anthrax attacks in this country. I mean, that was, you know, 5 people were killed. You can certainly imagine a terrorist getting some kind of biological weapon. But nonetheless, I mean, I think that the government, both the Bush administration and the Obama administration, has done a very good job of containing this threat. It will be persistent. It's not going to go away. But it's managed and contained. And, you know, in a political season, you're not going to hear a politician say that. But as you know, but that's the facts.
What about this debate in terms of radical Islam?
Yeah.
That this is a war, as some in the political realm have suggested, a war with radical Islam. Something the president doesn't like to use that phrase.
You know, it's an uncomfortable fact that this has something to do with Islam. I mean, you can't just wish that away. I mean, the Crusades had something to do with Christianity. The settler movement in the Palestinian territories has something to do with some Jewish fundamentalist beliefs about the Holy Land. And so this, I mean, of course, it's a cherry-picked version of Islam. But it is something to do with Islam, and the Muslim American community has to deal with that fact.
Well, should the president say it's radical Islam?
I understand why he doesn't say it, I think, Charlie, because I think, you know, he really doesn't want to give us the impression we're at war with Islam if he keeps saying it's Islamic. You know, so I mean, surely the president is a smart guy. He knows this has something to do with Islam, but he's not going out there saying it all the time.
Even George W. Bush didn't want to use that.
Right, right. And, you know, George W. Bush, to his great credit, visited a mosque a week after 9/11 in Washington, D.C., you may recall, and talked about recognizing a Palestinian state.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, Peter Bergen, thank you
really
for joining us at the table.
Thank you, Nora.
Do you mind if I mention that your book goes on sale today? Do you mind?
I would take great offense to that.
Okay. I'm going to do it anyway, Peter. It's called The United States of Jihad. It goes on sale today. Sunday.